In this video, we're going to talk about how to make sure users want to use your no-code app, and also how to make sure they want to keep using your no-code app. Because bringing users on board is one thing, but keeping them on board is another. And you need both of those things to ultimately see success with your app and your app-based business. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, make sure you stick around until the end, because every single one of these steps that we're about to go through is necessary for your app. And they're all something you need to be considering to make sure that you can scale as quickly as possible as soon as you launch your app. So make sure you stick around all the way through for that. Now, first, if you're new around here, my name is Kristen, and I'm the co-founder of Coaching No Code Apps, where we help business owners and industry experts build custom apps to either start their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses, all without coding and with no technical background required. So today, we're going to go through how to make sure users want to use your app. This is something that can be a little daunting because you have a really great app idea, you're solving a problem, you want to provide a solution to your market, but how can you be sure that your users, your target market, are actually going to want your app? And even more importantly, how can you make sure they're going to want to stay on board your app? Because you don't just want them coming in to have them go right back out. It's not a very good business model. So we're going to dive into that today, and we're going to talk about some different factors that you should be considering to help differentiate your app. Now, there are some of these that a lot of entrepreneurs get right, and there are some that go missed, but there are a lot of apps out there in the world. There are a lot of products. There can be a lot of noise. You have to stand out. You have to make sure your app is different. And there are, again, a number of ways you can go about this. I don't want you just focusing on one or two. I want you focusing on them all so you can set yourself up for the greatest chance of success as possible. So what I'm going to do is share my screen, and we are going to jump over to our whiteboard here. Face back up here. So you can see this pyramid on my screen here. And what we're going to talk about are the different layers of differentiation you can have within your app and that you should have, really. Okay, so there are 6 that we're going to go through today. And the way I want you to think about these is we're going to start at the base level of ways in which you can differentiate yourself. And we're going to go all the way up to the top. And again, you want to have all of these in place. You want to have a plan for all of these. So there are existing alternatives to your app that are already on the market. Now, it's important to understand why I use the term existing alternatives and not other apps. Existing alternatives aren't just other apps out there that people could be using aside from your own. Existing alternatives are other processes altogether. They're manual processes, pen and paper, whiteboards, spreadsheets, a combination of apps. Okay, so keep in mind that your target market, they're solving their problem in some way right now already. The problem that your app is being created to solve. Those are existing alternatives. So you have to differentiate your app from all of those, not just from other apps out there. So even if there's no other app that's just like yours, you still have to differentiate it so users know exactly why they should be using it and why they should continue using it outside of all the other existing alternatives. Okay, so keep that in mind. So the very first way you can separate yourself, this one's really, really easy and really straightforward, is by segmenting or creating a segment within your overall market. So we're going to say here, market segment. This is level number 1, okay? Level number 1, when you are building your app, when you are launching your app, make sure that it is being designed and catered to a specific segment of your market. You have to know who you're building your app for, what market and in what segment of that market. Okay, this is one of the easiest ways to differentiate your app. If you try to build your app for everyone, then your app is ultimately going to be for no one. But if you can identify exactly who your app is for, then you have a starting point for differentiating yourself. Okay, because an app built for everyone is very general. It has to be very general with the features, processes, everything about it. The business has to be very general because it has to appeal to everyone. And that's a wide range of needs and wants when you're talking about everyone, right? But if you decide on a segment of a market of who you want your app to appeal to, well, then you can start building your app and catering it to a specific type of person. That makes you more of a specialist. Okay, now when someone really has a problem that they need solved, usually they're going to look to a specialist to solve that problem if it's a specific problem. So this gives you a leg up in terms of differentiation. So make sure you know who you're building your app for. Now, once you have that, and keep in mind, you can segment as much as you want. You can choose a market, then you can choose a segment of that market, and you can niche down even more from there if you choose. Okay, but the more narrow you go, as long as there's still a need for your app, of course, then the more specialized you're going to become, the easier it is to build your app because you have a very specific set of needs, which means a very specific set of features. And the easier it becomes to market and sell your app because, again, you are the specialist. So the further into that you go, the more differentiated you are. Okay, and that's one way to help users understand exactly why they need your app and why they need to keep using your app, because it's for them and not for someone else. Okay, now the next layer on top of this is features, right? You can differentiate your app based on the features you are building. So let's look at other existing alternatives on the market. And let's look at other software right now in this instance. Other existing alternatives might have specific features, and you may be building a very similar app, but yours might have some different features. Okay, that differentiates you from that existing app, right? That also maybe serves a similar market or a similar segment of the market. So you can differentiate based on features, the things your app does, right? This is pretty straightforward, and this is what a lot of people do, differentiating yourself based on features. Now, the next one up, and this is also a common one we see, differentiating yourself based on price, okay? Differentiating yourself based on price, again, very straightforward. You have a different price or a different pricing structure, different pricing model than other existing alternatives out there. Now, we don't have to just look at apps to differentiate based on price. We can also look at other processes altogether. Maybe currently your target market is outsourcing something that your app now automates. Well, you can differentiate based on price because the cost of outsourcing could be vastly different than the cost of using your app. And that is a price differentiator if you want to look at value, right? So that's a reason why people should use your app, right? And keep using your app because you have a different price. But again, this can apply to existing apps as well. You could be building a really similar app as someone else, but it could have a different pricing model. It could be cheaper, whatever it may be. You can differentiate based on price, a really common one we see. Okay. Now, moving up is where we start to see fewer people differentiating themselves. The next level up, we have service. Okay. Service, customer service, how you treat your users, how you guide your users, how you help your users. This is a way you can differentiate your app and your business from all the other apps and businesses out there. You can provide a higher level of customer service, right? Again, pretty straightforward, but we're now moving away from tangible things like price and features, which are kind of not set in stone, but you either have features or you don't. You either have a certain price or you don't. With service, this is something that it's a little bit different from company to company. It can be based on values. It can be based on the type of user or customer you are serving. So service is where you can really start to differentiate on the less tangible things like price or features or market. And you can start to differentiate based on your own values and the way you like to treat people. Okay, so that's where we start to see even more of a clear separation. And it's definitely a reason why some users will choose to use an app or work with a company over another company, even if the features and the price are all the same. The market segment, even if all of that is the same, customer service can still differentiate you enough to have users knowing exactly why they should use your no-code app and why they should stay on board as well. So this is a really important one to consider. Again, it's often overlooked. Now, continuing up, we have a couple more. The next one is brand. Again, I see fewer and fewer people differentiating based on their brand, especially when we're talking about apps and the tech space. It can be easy to see a lot of similarities from one app to the next. A lot of them tend to look the same. A lot of them, their branding is the same, the images, everything, it kind of all meshes together. Well, branding, especially in the app space, is a way you can really differentiate your app and your company. Now, this just builds on top of service. With brand, we're looking at things like messaging, marketing, how you convey the value of your app. This is all a really good way to help users understand why they should work with you, why they should use your app versus someone else's. Because at the end of the day, you can look at 10 different apps and they can all have the same exact market segment, same features, same price, same high quality customer service, but all their branding can be different. And the way you brand your company and your app can appeal to certain users over someone else's, even though everything you're providing could hypothetically otherwise be the same. So you really want to look at this component. And again, it's often overlooked, but you want to keep it in mind because with branding, you can convey the value of your app. Your app is just a set of features, a set of processes that enable users to achieve something, okay? The thing they're achieving is what gives them value. It's what makes your app valuable. So if you can convey that in different ways, in better ways, then that can certainly differentiate you completely from existing alternatives out there. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now we're going to go one more here, and we're going to look at experience. Experience means what you bring to the table. Now, this is one that I see completely overlooked again and again and again. There are a lot of entrepreneurs who are really worried about other existing alternatives, about competition, about someone else copying their features, their price, or whatever it may be, their app idea even. But every single one of those entrepreneurs is failing to remember that their experience, their expertise already differentiates them. And that's something you can't replicate. Your experience, meaning what's your insight into the industry for which you're building this app? What's your understanding of the market? What's your connection of the market? What's your background in this industry? Have you worked in the industry? Are you an avid consumer in this industry? What do you know about it? What are your connections? Who are your contacts? Do you already have people who you know in this industry who can help you build quick traction with your app because you already have potential alpha users, beta users, right? What are you bringing to the table? This is something that is a clear differentiator because this is not replicable, not at all. So remember that your experience and what you bring to the table is a very important way to differentiate your app from the rest. Okay, so we have these 6 layers of differentiators. I want you to keep all of them in mind. Now we're going to go through them and we're going to talk about ways in which you can use them successfully in some ways where they don't really, people tend to miss the mark in using them as differentiators. Okay. So first, let's talk about market segment. A lot of entrepreneurs think that by narrowing down their market segment and by building their app for a specific person within a market means they are not, they're kind of pushing away a whole bunch of other potential users who could maybe want to use their app, right? So by narrowing down their market, they are deflecting whole hordes of potential users, and it's really hard for them to do that. I want you to try to get out of that mindset because, again, look at it from the perspective of being a generalist versus a specialist. Yes, you can be a generalist, and yes, there are apps out there who are for everyone and you can do everything and they're very general. But I do want to push you to think about how those apps evolved. Most general apps started out as specialists, right? They got really good at one thing, serving one segment of the market, solving one specific problem, providing one specific outcome. And once they got really good at that, then they evolved and they pushed into the next segment of the market, or they expanded their market. And then they did one thing really well for that larger group of people, right? And they kind of grew from there. Okay, and you can do that too. Some apps you'll see they're going to be specialists through and through, and they're going to grow that way. But it's going to be easier for you to build quick traction if you do segment down. And while it can feel like you are just pushing people away, or you are by default deflecting people, really what you're doing is pulling the right people towards you instead of leaving it unclear as to whether your app is really for them in the first place. So yes, you might be narrowing yourself, and you might be, not including everyone who could possibly ever use your app, but you're going to be pulling the right people towards you, and that's even more important. Okay, so think about that. Make sure you do have some specifically defined market or segment of who your app is for. Now, features. This is where I see most people trying to differentiate their apps, is with features. They're building different features than the other apps out there. Okay. So yes, you can do that, but I want you to keep in mind, to play devil's advocate here, features are replicable. A feature is a process. It's just a thing in your app that it serves a functionality. It's replicable. Anybody can copy a feature. So if you put your app out there and someone else sees it and they say, oh, I like this feature, I want to build this too. Well, they could include it in their app. Okay. That's not to say you shouldn't differentiate yourself based on features, but there's a right way to look at it and a wrong way to look at it. The wrong way to look at it is to look at another app and say, okay, I need to be different from this, so I am going to build different features, and that's going to set me apart. That's the wrong way to look about it that's the wrong way to go about it, because that app or that business could turn around and look at your app and say, well, they have these features, now I'm going to build these features. And then it's just kind of this game of back and forth of who can build the more features the fastest, right? That's the wrong way to go about it. The right way to go about it is to look at your users' needs and say, okay, how can I take my users from having the current problem that they have when they come to me in my app, and how can I bring them to a different outcome? How can I remove that problem and provide them with an outcome using my app? Okay. Build the features that enable the outcome. Build the features that remove the problem and enable the outcome. Differentiate yourself based on the results or the outcome you provide for your users. That should always guide your feature sets, not what another app is doing, but what provides the best results for your users. This is what we do in our own business. This isn't specific to apps. This is for business through and through, right? This is what we do with our own clients in our mentorship program. We don't look at what other people are doing. We look at how to provide the absolute best results possible. And if you do that with your app, you're going to differentiate yourself based on features because you're going to have the right features in place, not based on what someone else is doing, but what your users need. Okay, so that's the right way to go about it. Now, moving up, we'll look at price. Price, yes, you can differentiate yourself based on price, but it's kind of the same as features, right? At the end of the day, anyone can have the same pricing structure as you. When you're differentiating based on price, it's often a race to the bottom if you're just looking at a set price, right? Because if you're looking to be cheaper, well, you're the winner of this game is the one that's happiest with the smallest profit margin. So if you're going to differentiate based on price, then make sure it's along with the same lines that we looked at with the features. Make sure it's because it is better for your users in some way, right? It should provide them with a specific result. You should have a reason and an intent for your pricing structure, not just to make it different from someone else's just as a way to say, hey, we're different, but to say, hey, this is why this is in place. And this makes us different because it provides you with these results. So if you're differentiating based on price, make sure you know why. What's your intent? Okay, now when we get up to service, customer service, this is where we start to look at just how you want to treat your users. How can you help them use your app? How can you train them on using your app? How can you provide them with great service? This one's pretty self-explanatory, right? You can go a lot of different ways with customer service, but this is where the differentiation really starts to happen, where your values come through as a company, how you treat people, how you're perceived, right? So this is a good way to start differentiating yourself aside from just the more tangible specifics in the app. And then brand, it's the same thing. This is what we talked about with messaging, with marketing, with conveying the value around your app. The way in which you do this, it can happen in a lot of different ways. This is one of the first things that we start to look at with our own private clients, because you're looking at all the technical features that you want to build, right? You're looking at building all your features, but you have to balance that out, and you have to look at the value those features provide. You have to start creating the right messaging, the right way to convey your brand. This is one of the things we start working on right at the beginning, because they should happen together, right? It's a really clear differentiator and something that you want to start thinking about early on. And then we get all the way up to, right, that experience level. And again, this is the thing that nobody can take from you. This is the thing that nobody can replicate: your experience, what you bring to the table. Okay, so start thinking on that. What is it that you bring to the table? What makes you different as the founder of this app, as the person who's serving your target market, right? That is as clear and cut as a differentiator as you can have. Okay, now in looking at each of these differentiators, I want you to look at it and see which ones you have, or which ones you have in mind. Okay, do you have the market segment? Do you have the features? Do you have the price? Okay, these first ones down here on the bottom of our pyramid, do you have these? This is what most people have. These are the differentiators that most people at least have a general idea of, how they want to put these in place, the direction they want to take, right? But you have to have these to ultimately build a long-term, scalable app, a business that grows long-term. You have to have the top half to really set yourself apart. So if you're just focusing on the bottom half, you may struggle to set yourself apart. You may find that you are lost in the sea of existing alternatives. Once you have this top half in place, right? Once you have all of these up here, that's when you really differentiate yourself. That's when you set yourself apart from all those existing alternatives. And that is when it becomes very clear to users why they should be using your app and why they should continue using your app. Okay, these up here, right? These are priority, right? These are the things, like I said, that we start focusing on really early on because the ones down here at the bottom, right, these are all replicable. So yes, you can differentiate yourself based on them, and you can do it in the right way versus the wrong way, like we talked about. But once you get up to the top, that's where you really set yourself apart. You remove yourself from that sea of existing alternatives, and you place yourself on another level. And so I would encourage you to think through all of these and to make sure you have a plan for how you want to execute your differentiation. Okay, moving forward, this is what's going to help you ultimately continue to grow and scale long term, aside from just the features and the price points, the pricing tiers, and things like that that you have. So keep this in mind. Now, if you are just starting out with your app, if you've started building, and let me get my, there we go. If you have started building your app already, or if you have just started out and you're just in that idea phase still, you're moving forward, you're thinking about things like this, or you're thinking about growing a long-term business, not just kind of putting an idea out there, but really executing on it, pushing it forward, growing it long-term. If that's the path you want to head down, then we have a free workshop you can join in on. It's at coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. And what we're going to do in this workshop is take you through a step-by-step process to help you plan out an initial roadmap for your app's development, testing, and launch phases. So you can go through that in the most strategic way possible. So like I said, even if you've started building your app, but if you're kind of just starting out, go back, make sure you have these pieces in place so that you can move forward and create a scalable app, and not just a scalable app, but a scalable app-based business, something that can serve your users and yourself in the long term. So you can head to that workshop, coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop, and go through that process. Learn some more about the no-code tools that we use, about leveraging them to launch and scale your app, and move forward with your app in the right direction. Ultimately, we want you moving forward quickly, and we want you moving forward correctly so you can, again, launch and scale your business and ultimately have that impact your life and the lives of your users. So we'll hope to see you there. But thanks so much for watching. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you in the next one.